All right, so you're looking for a new swim bait reel. We're gonna go through the Abu Garcia Revo Beast X, the Luz Super Duty 300, and the Curado 300K. The first thing we're going to do is go over the basics of each reel. It's gonna be bearing count, lie capacity, that kind of stuff. And then we're gonna break into the actual reel schematics. I'm gonna look at all three of the parts diagrams for each one of these reels. We're going to go into the details of what actually makes these reels different and what might be better for you. All right, kicking us off is going to be the price point. Starting with the cheapest one of the bunch, that's going to be the Abu Garcia Revo Beast X at $199. Followed up by the Luz Super Duty 300 coming in at $219. And right there in between them is going to be the Shimano Curado 300K at $209. These are all well within striking distance of each other, so I would say that any of the differences that we're going to be talking about in this video should not sway your decision based on price at all. They're all real tight. You can probably find one on sale, one not on sale. And I want you to take a look at the details of each reel and figure out what's going to be best for you. All right, so let's talk about bearing count between these three reels. The first one is going to be the Abu, and that comes in at 7 plus 1 roller bearing. The Luz comes in right there in the middle with 6 plus 1, and finishing it up with the Curado 300K comes in at a 5 plus 1 setup. Before you make any assumptions and say, hey, more bearings is more better, let's just hold off for a second. Let's get into the real schematics here in just a minute, and you'll see where these bearings are and if they're really going to make a difference for you or not. Next up is going to be line capacity, and that's a big deal when you start talking about a 300 size spool reel. Those 300 size spools, they're going to spin slower than like a 200, and therefore it's easier on you to cast with less thumb control, less braking really required. So let's get into that. The Abu Garcia will take 205 yards of 14-pound line. The Luz will take 190 yards of 14-pound line, and finishing up with the Curado, it will take 180 yards of 14-pound line. All right, let's talk about drag for just a second. All of these reels are going to have more than enough drag for you, but we're going to go ahead and touch on it real quick. The Abu Garcia is going to come in with 24 pounds of drag, followed right there with the Luz Super Duty 300, also at 24 pounds of drag. Finishing up with the Curado 300K is a little bit lower, coming in at 18 pounds for the HG version. If you get the non-HG version, you get Curado, you get another couple pounds, putting you at 22. All things said, 18 pounds is a lot of drag. I mean, that's like a bowling ball and a half pulling dead on your line. That's going to be enough to wear out most any fish that you can come into inshore fishing or even big freshwater fishing. So all things said, these are all going to take care of whatever you need when it comes to drag. I do have to give the nod to the Luz folks on this one because they listen to us. They know what we like. We're very simple sometimes, but they put in a clicker drag. We all love clicker drags, especially on a bait caster. I don't know why that is. We all like clicker drags. So give the Luz the nod for putting that on this reel. Nice job. Gear ratios, and more importantly, line recovery. Starting off the Abu Garcia, it comes in only one gear ratio, and that is a 6.4 to 1, which brings in 30 inches of line per turn. Next up is the Luz. It comes in two flavors, the 6.5 to 1, that brings in 31 inches of line, and then the 7.2 to 1, which brings in a full 35 inches of line, almost 3 feet. Finally, with the Shimano Curado 300K, it also comes in two flavors. The 4.7 to 1 brings in 25 inches of line, and then the 6.6 to 1 brings in 35 inches of line. So let's take a look at line recovery this way. They're lined up by the slowest reel to the fastest reel as far as line recovery rate goes. You'll see that the Curado 300 4.7 to 1 is the slowest out of the bunch, and that brings in 25 inches of line per turn. But that's not necessarily a slow reel. So I want you to also consider, if you look at a 200K Curado, a 6.2 to 1 reel brings in 26 inches of line per turn. So the 4.7, don't get scared that it's below 5, that it's going to be a super slow reel. It still picks up plenty of line. It's much quicker than you would think if you're coming from like a 150 or 200 series spool and jumping up to a 300. So keep that in mind. On the other end of the scale is the Luz and the HG Curado, both at 35 inches of line. There's about a half a turn difference in gear ratio between the two, but you'll see that they both bring in the same amount of line. If I give you nothing else, make sure when you're comparing two different reels, even the same kind of series of reel, make sure you're looking at the line recovery rate and not only the gear ratio of the two reels that you're taking a look at. So weight is something that comes up anytime people start comparing reels. Let's go ahead and touch on that real quick. The Abu Garcia comes in at 9.4 ounces. The lightest one of the bunch, I'll add. Coming in at second in weight is going to be the Luz at 9.9 ounces, but I do need to mention that the traditional double paddle handle on the Luz comes in at 9.2, so it's a little bit lighter, actually lighter than the Abu Garcia. And then the last one there is the Shimano Curado at 10.8 ounces, so more than a full ounce heavier than the Abu and almost an ounce heavier than the big handle Luz. I will mention that the non-HG version is also a little bit lighter at 10.6 ounces. When it comes to fishability, yeah, I can notice the difference between the Abu and the Curado, but I would also say there's probably a quality difference there as well. So it doesn't bother me too much. Next one up is going to be braking, slowing down that spool when you're making the cast, and I expected these to be closer than they were, and there's quite a few differences here, so let's go through them. So starting off with the Abu Garcia, I'll show it to you right here. We have magnetic brakes, no centrifugal brakes on the spool. I don't particularly like that. I like the adjustability that centrifugal gets you. It does definitely do a different function over the constant drag of magnetic brakes. I will say that even on the max setting, you do have enough magnetic braking to make a reasonable cast with it. But I would say that my casting distance of this one versus like the Luz or even the Curado is not as good as it could be. I feel like I'm giving up some distance due to the magnetic brakes, basically having to overcompensate for the lack of centrifugal brakes. So not my favorite, Abu. Next one up is going to be the Luz. And I was a bit surprised when we got to the Luz on what they have to offer. Let me get this out of here. And the Luz, you take this guy off and you have magnetic brakes and centrifugal brakes. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-way adjustable centrifugal brake. What I do not particularly care for is I can lose this. This comes off. It's a little wonky to get on because you have to pull this lever over here to take this door off, which is kind of a three-handed kind of thing, but once you get used to it, it's not so bad. So I would say that out of the three, this one is my favorite to cast. It does have dual braking systems. It's plenty adjustable. I like to tweak my brakes to get the most out of it. I tend to spend a lot of time doing that, maybe too much time, I don't know. Do you adjust yours? Anyway, I would say that the Luz gives you plenty of adjustability, anything you can ever want in a braking system, and it does a pretty good job at it. So thumbs up there for the Luz reel. Last one up is going to be the Shimano Curado, and we're going to talk about its brakes. Also has a losable side plate. Not my favorite for a $200 reel. We can do the hinge thing that they do on the 200Ks. It would be okay. No magnetic brakes. This is the inner race for the centrifugal braking system, which is shown here, there. You can see that there's plenty of pads here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6-way adjustable, similar to the Luz, but only centrifugal braking. Now, you can kind of get away with adding a little bit of spool tension to adjust that kind of second part of the cast, but not my favorite, just adding drag to the overall reel operation to get that done. So I would say could be better, and I have noticed when you make a really bomber cast with like a big glide bait, right, that thing can catch some wind, and if it does slow down on the second half of the cast, you can get some pretty wicked backlashes with this thing if your thumb is not ready to go. So that being said, I have to give the nod to the Luz team for the most adjustable braking system out of the three that we're talking about today. Okay, so you've made it this far, and I appreciate you hanging with me. If you haven't already, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. Starting with the reel schematics on the Revo Beast X. This one is a 7+1 bearing reel. So we can see, let's zoom in here. Start with the easy ones here. So this is showing our spool here, and there's 1, 2 bearings on the spool. Pretty typical, nothing new or exciting there. Coming up here, we have 2 bearings on each side of the level wind assembly. Okay, that's typically not a high load thing. So on the Shimano, that's going to be bushed. I don't really see an enormous value here for putting bearings here, but bearings nonetheless are better than bushings, and there they are. The next one we're going to talk about is going to be number 39 here, and this is on the back side of the ring gear drive crank assembly. Ring gear is here shown in blue and 128. bearing there on the back side, and the other side of that crank drive is going to be supported by the roller bearing. So that's pretty good. That is also pretty typical, so bearing there. And then getting down here to the last one, number 58, this one's going to be supporting the smooth part of the pinion here, so plenty of support there. Shown on 107 and 109 here in the handle, there are no bearings there. And so we have our roller bearing, 56. Now let's take a look at the drag system. So on the drag side of the Abu, we have a single fiber disc surrounded with some steels. That's pretty basic. Not that you can't do it, but given it's a 24-pound rated drag system, that feels like a lot for a single drag washer system. So I would be a little bit hesitant to buy into that personally. Going into the SD3 SHJ is going to be a little bit different than the double paddle handle one, just in the bearing count. This one is a 6+1 on the box, but it's a little bit goofy with the handle. There's two bearings within the handle, technically, so maybe they're just counting that as one assembly, but nevertheless, let's dive into that. Obviously on the spool we have 107 and 89. Those are our two spool bearings, nothing exciting there. Jumping up to number 10, we have one bearing on the level line assembly instead of two on the Abu Garcia. Going to number 24, on the back side of the ring gear assembly, we have a ball bearing there as well. That's good. The pinion gear, however, is really only supported by the spool. Moving on, we have the 53 is our roller and our reverse bearing. That's on every reel on the planet. And then 55 here is providing some additional support on the spool side. So it's going to be right there next to on the other side of the pinion. So that shaft itself is going to be supported by a pinion. So that's good. It's not kind of out there on its own, but just not my favorite design. I'd rather have that bearing really feed directly into a bearing itself rather than to be on the spool shaft. Not to say it doesn't work. Obviously Luz makes plenty of reels, but just not my favorite style. And then here for the big handle version, we have 79 and 81 are actually both bearings. Maybe they're just counting those as one assembly. I don't know what the deal is there. I'm technically counting 7 bearings here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whatever, that's up to Luz. And then if you get the double paddle version, you get bearings there as well. There is the Luz setup. Let's take a look at the drag real quick. If you recall, the Abu Garcia only had a single disc system. This one has 3 fibers in there, shown in purple, with the clicker assembly and then the steels in between them. So I would say if I had to put, both of these are rated at 24 pounds for the Abu and the Luz. If I had to put money on which one is going to have more endurance, it's going to be the Luz for sure. That multi-disc setup gets you a lot versus just a single disc. So that is the Luz Super Duty 300. All right, so you made it to the last one, and we are covering now the Shimano 300K diagram. This is a 5+1 reel, and let's get into where those are at. We'll start here, common to the other ones on the back side of the ring gear assembly. Ring gear shown here in blue, 6725. That's going to be supported by a ball bearing. That's good. That's common with all the other reels. Let me make a quick stop here at the level line assembly. These are bushed. There are no bearings there, so that's really your primary difference from a bearing count between the 5+1 Shimano and then the 7+1 Abu is really ball bearings in the level line system. Not a big deal to me. Anyway, moving on. We have on the back side of the pinion assembly, so this is your pinion gear, big guy here, and it's going to engage in the spool with those prongs, and it will have a ball bearing directly on the pinion itself. This blue surface here is going to go into that yellow surface there and is completely supported there. That is good. Coming over on, let's jump out down here. So this pinion gear will actually feed into this bearing here, 4945. And so this pinion gear is grabbed on both ends with the ball bearing, which is my preferred method of affixing a pinion gear. I like that. And then the last two here, typical with pretty much any reel on the planet, and that's going to be your spool bearings. So those are your 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bearings, plus the roller in there on the Curado. So let's go take a look at the drag assembly of the Curado. You can see in purple here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 fiber discs on the Shimano setup. It's also rated lower. It's rated at 18 versus the 24 of the other reels. But again, the more fibers, you're really getting endurance out of that. 18 pounds is plenty. Just touching down here on the handle. These are all going to be bushings here. 5, 3, 3, 4. Let me double check that. Yeah, those are bushings here on the handle. So, you know, where Luz was putting bushings, so where Luz was putting ball bearings there in the handle, Shimano does not. And it makes no difference to me. You know, maybe there's some subjective smoothness there, but for me that makes no difference. So there are the reel schematics for all 3 reels. So let's close this out. Let's talk about what reel do I recommend you go spend your hard-earned money on. We're gonna rank these. Coming in at number 3 is gonna be the Abu Garcia for me. Nice reel, I like it. It's plenty smooth. I don't really like that they're putting bearings in the level wind system and calling that as like, oh, it's got more bearings, it's more better. Okay, it makes no difference. It's not as refined, I don't think. Using it works fine. If you get a great deal on it, I don't think you'll be disappointed in it, but the drag system's a little bit simplistic. I think it'll be a fine reel for maybe more cranking or something like that, but if you're really trying to go after trophy fish, I would pick one of the other 2s. Coming in second, it's gonna be hard for me because I don't have a lot of time on one of these quite yet, but I know which one I have an inclination for. So I'm going to maybe switch up how I have them stacked here and say second for me is gonna be the Curado. I'm a Shimano guy, so it really hurts to say that. And I'm gonna put an asterisk on that. This one I've had the longest, and it is buttery smooth. It's been a great reel for me. That said, there's some left to be desired when it comes to casting this guy. I've been throwing a bait caster since I was a tiny baby, and I've had my fair share of explosive casts with this thing. With only having the centrifugal brake system, it seems to work fine on the Curado Ks that I have. It seems to work fine on the SLX I have, but on the second half of that cast where you kind of want those magnets to come into play, I can tell it's missing. Out of the box, I'm able to sling the Luz further, more confidently, right? Some of you guys, I'm not that guy, but some of you guys are throwing multi-$100 baits, right? $100, $150 bait. And if you get one of those crazy backlashes with one of those baits and you snap that line, you're gonna be upset. And so I'd say the Curado is a little bit finicky when it comes to casting, and that's gonna be why it is not my number 1. That said, like I said, I haven't had a lot of time on the Luz, which is the last one left here, so time will tell me if that one is better or not. I will leave you a comment if I haven't, comment down below if I have any issues with it. But that would leave me with number 1 so far with the Luz, and I'm gonna have to go with this one. I like the clicker drag because maybe I'm just that simple. It does have a nice drag setup in it with the multi-disc setup. I like the big handle. I like the way it casts. It casts very, very, very well. So that's gonna do it for us. The last thing I maybe wanna leave you with is, do you really need a 300 size reel? And that's something that a lot of folks maybe need some more answers to. And I'd recommend checking out this video right here. We'll see you next time.